We've reached the realm of Formless Rapture now. This is chapter 21. And the Pali for this is the end of the Heavenly Realms section. So this is the last of these. And as I mentioned before, this is where all the Brahma Lokas get sort of compressed into a sort of one heading. The original, or the proper version of the original version of this in the sutta, you have a whole series of Brahma worlds named from the lowest all the way up to the highest. I think there's about 18 of them listed, and they're all just comprised, sort of compressed together to this, and all of them are comprised together under this one heading. So the Pali for this section reads: Brahma Kaika Deva Saddhamanusave Sum Etam Bhagavata Varanasiyang Isipatane Migadaye Anuttarang Dhammachakang Bhavatitang Appativatiyang Samanena va Brahmanena va Devena va Marena va Brahmana va Kenachiva Lokasminti. And the English for that is: the Devas of the retinue of the Brahma deities took up the cry. At Varanasi, in the deer park at Isipatana, the matchless wheel of Dhamma has been set rolling by the Blessed One, not to be stopped by any samana or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world. And the painting that we have here is this great washes of mauve and purple and rose and crimson. The hands in the center are still in the Dhammachakra mudra. That's the mudra representing the turning of the wheel, and the spokes of the wheel have almost disappeared completely into the blazing light. And we have various deities on either side here with their hands in Anjali and various sort of wing-like auras and spouts of spiritual flame bursting out of their heads. And the sort of the weaving of various patterns of light and form kind of swirling around, representing the Brahma Loka. And Ajahn Sucitto will go into a bit more explanation about the sources of his imagery here. There's still a little bit of knotwork, sort of the kind of Celtic knotwork motif is sort of plaited there in the edges of these deities. It's not sure whether it's their robes or their hair or just their accoutrements of some kind, but otherwise there's no border, and there's no representing a lack of limit and the infinite quality of the Brahma world. So that when we chant the recollections of the four Brahma Viharas, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha, as the people will be familiar, then the words that we use to describe them are of unbounded, immeasurable, limitless, and that that quality of infinity and limitlessness is an aspect of these high Brahma worlds. By the time we reach this realm, we are at the Brahmakaika Deva Loka. The Brahmakaika Devas are the assembly of Devas who attend the Brahma deities. They occupy the first level of the next world, the world of the Brahma. The beings in the Brahma Loka have no sense desire, and a form that is more refined than that of the six realms, so the ones below, like from all the rest of the Kama Loka, the sense desire realm. They also have a correspondingly long lifespan. They have attained this state of being through the development of absorptive meditation and loving kindness. The Brahmakaika Devas live in a state of devotion to what seems eternal and lofty. All of the Devatar experience happiness and bliss, but the higher the Devaloka, the more refined the object, as well as its resulting pleasure. Here the object is formless, indefinite. In the realm of the Brahma gods, form is tenuous, yet these realms are also impermanent and subject to becoming and illusions of selfhood. This realm is equivalent to the mind that enters into a state of very steady happiness, born of faith without investigation. This happiness is an oceanic sense of oneness with, and trust in, the benevolence of the universe. Despite the fundamental goodness of this realm, it's subject to delusion. The mind goes to sleep. The object of one's faith, whether it be called God, the Tao, the Dhamma, the One, ultimate truth, is conceived in sufficiently remote and indefinable terms to be beyond investigation. It's beyond good and bad, or any other definition. This has an element of truth. Even awakened ones say that ultimate truth is beyond designations. With no ill effects at first, the mind can slip into attitudes that lack discernment. It's all Dhamma, we think, and we lose our sense of direction. There's only the inclination to stay in a state of oneness and rapture for as long as possible and avoid the more abrasive energies of the sense realms. Yet the trials and pulls of the sense realms highlight the self-view and the liberation that is realized through abandoning it. Hence, the way of practice is outlined time and again in ways that are tangible. The Buddha kept his frames of reference linked to states that did not fascinate the mind or act as soporifics. And soporific means something that sends you to sleep. So if I start droning on and my reading of this text gets a little bit boring, then that's having a soporific effect. One of the things also to maybe mention is that the Brahma worlds are grouped. The first 12 of them are grouped in sets of 3. So you have the retinue of Brahma, and then the ministers of Brahma, and then the realm of Brahma, and then you have the retinue of the next level of Brahma gods, and then the ministers of that realm, and then the Brahma gods of that realm. So that there's 4 of those, and 4 sets of 3, and they correspond to the 4 jhanas, like first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, and so that there's a very direct correspondence between the kind of bliss that somebody in a deep state of absorption realizes and the experience of the Brahma realms. So that, again, just going on back to the theme that's come up a few times of how, even though we're talking in terms of cosmology, of other realms or different beings, there's a way that these map onto our inner life. And so then you have the lower Brahma realms representing the states of absorption, first, second, third, fourth jhana, and you also then have the formless jhanas, the arupa jhana, which so the next higher levels of absorption, the arupa jhanas, and that they are realms of absorption, but without any kind of object. There's no form. So whereas the meditation is formless, arupa means without form. So similarly, those Brahma realms, the beings who are born in those realms, only have mind. They don't have any kind of form. They don't even have a subtle form. They're just mind only in those realms. And along the way, as I mentioned a day or two ago, you have these Sudavasa, the 5 realms where anagamis get born. So they're up in the upper reaches of the Brahma Loka. And so it's said that in all of the different lifetimes of the Bodhisattva, during the vastly long career of birth after birth, developing the 10 paramitas, the only realms that after a being has made the Bodhisattva vow, the only realms that they're not born into is the 5 Sudavasa, those 5 pure abodes, because kind of once you're born there, then seemingly the dynamics of it is that any being who's born in those realms will necessarily reach enlightenment in the relatively near future, and they can't be born in the human realm again, or the lower realms. And so that so even though a bodhisattva might be born in the formless Brahma realms, which are even higher, that they can reappear in the human realm. And it's also interesting that the Mahabrahma, which means like the great Brahma, who is a sort of Yahweh figure, the sort of Jehovah figure of the sort of Buddhist mythology, that Mahabrahma is only in the third level up of the Brahma worlds, and there's a time when the Buddha meets this Brahma god Baka, who is convinced that he's the creator of the universe. The Buddha said, and when the Buddha is trying to teach this Brahma that he's not, in fact, the creator of the universe or the ultimate embodiment of all things, but he when they have this interface with each other, the Buddha said, well, if you are really the Supreme Being, it will be possible for you to vanish from me, and so that I couldn't see you. And he said, yes, that's right. And then he tried to vanish, but he couldn't get away from the Buddha. And the Buddha said, but then if you were indeed that kind of supreme deity in ways, then I wouldn't be able to vanish from your sight. He said, that's right. And then the Buddha disappears and says, you can't see me, Brahma. Your realm only extends so far and no further. And then he says, and in fact, there's actually 18 Brahma realms higher than where you are. So not only are you not the creator and source of the universe, but there's actually 18 Brahma realms above you that you didn't even know existed. So it sort of tries to set that Brahma straight in that way. And also you'll remember, or those of you who were here when I was talking about it before, that in amongst that, and I think it's at the highest of the, after you got to the sort of fourth jhana level of the Brahma worlds, there's a special little extra Brahma world called the Asanyasatta Brahma realm, which is the realm of unconscious beings. And that's where, if you have profound concentration based upon an aversion to the sense world, then that creates the karma of there's a negativity in there of a sort of fear or rejection or dismissal of the sense world. And so if that's a strong enough condition, then a being will be born in the Asanyasatta Brahma realm, where you have a fantastically long lifespan and a glorious Brahma body, and live in a fantastically beautiful Brahma palace in this amazingly glorious infinite landscape, but you'll be totally unconscious for the entire 20,000 eons of your lifespan. So you sleep through the whole thing. So that it's that unconsciousness is the karmic result of having rejected or resented the sense world. When the mind is also the kind of object that is used, or the basis for the rebirth in the Brahma realms. When we chant the Brahma Viharas, that means literally divine abidings, but also there are different meditation practices of entering into jhana where you can use those qualities of loving kindness or compassion or sympathetic joy or equanimity as ways of developing those profound states of concentration. So they're also said for creating the sublime abiding, or the Brahma Vihara, as an attitude of mind in the worldly sense that can be an abiding, and that if that's developed and say pursued to its fulfillment, then that will also lead to, say, rebirth in a Brahma world. So there's a time where the Buddha said that he was reborn as the Mahabrahma 7 lifetimes in a row, or I forget the exact number, but several lifetimes in a row, and then born as Indra 36 lifetimes in a row. And that was all on the basis of him having been a yogi, developing loving kindness. So he developed for a 7-year period as a meditator, as a yogi. He developed the absorption into metta, Brahma Vihara, and that resulted in sort of extremely strong karma of the mind being born into these bright realms. And so that's again, you can map that onto our own everyday experience. If you, when you meet people, or you're out on the M25, or you're in Waitrose, and rather than thinking, oh, these people, what crowds, or oh no, who have I got to work in the kitchen with today? Oh no, not her. Oh dear. Rather than the mind going towards its usual judgments and its preferences to say, look,
So many people that I can spread loving kindness to. Fantastic. Traffic has ground to an absolute halt on the M25. Great. I can really focus on loving kindness to all these good beings that I'm sharing this road with. What a wonderful opportunity. And so when you direct your mind in that way and you relate to other beings as an opportunity to generate loving kindness and thoughts of benevolence, then you live in a bright world. You might not have a lifespan of 20,000 eons, but that's how we generate a bright world to live in, when your mind is, choosing that path of non-contention, and choosing the path of acceptance and goodwill to all beings around you. So, the trials and pulls of the sense realms highlights the self of you, and the liberation that is realized through abandoning it. Hence the way of practice is outlined time and again in ways that are tangible. The Buddha kept his frames of reference linked to states that did not fascinate the mind or act as soporifics. And this is his advice to Mahapajapati Gautami, the Buddha gave. But whatever are the states of which you, Gautami, may know, these states lead to passionlessness, not to passion. Absence of bondage, not to bondage. Absence of accumulation, not to accumulation. Leading to wanting little, not wanting much. Lead to contentment, not dissatisfaction. To solitude, not sociability. Putting forth energy, not to indolence. Ease in supporting oneself, not to difficulty in supporting oneself. You should know, Gautami, this is the Dhamma, this is the discipline, this is the teacher's instruction. Well, these were the words on Dhamma that the Buddha addressed to the first nun, Mahapajapati Gautami, his stepmother and aunt. Applying this reflection within her practice, she also realized Nibbana. So she'd gone to the Buddha asking for some guidance in practice and saying, how do I know what is the Dhamma? How do I know what is not the Dhamma? What's the right thing to do? And then the Buddha gave her this series of 10 qualities that she could use as a measure of what's the right path. So just to go over those again. Whatever the states of which you know, Gautami, they lead to passionlessness, so to coolness of heart, not to passion. They lead to absence of bondage, so a lack of dependency, not to bondage. To absence of accumulation, so to living simply, not to accumulation. To wanting little, not wanting much, not being needy or dependent. To contentment, not to dissatisfaction. To solitude, so the things that lead you to choosing to be alone or not to be caught up in socializing and chit-chat. Things that lead to putting forth of energy, to engagement and to alert attention to things. Not to indolence, not to being lazy. To ease in supporting oneself, not to difficulty in supporting oneself. So again, being one who is not needy or demanding or requiring a whole set of supportive conditions in order to feel comfortable or happy. And then he said, if something possesses these qualities, then you should know, Gautami, this is the Dhamma, this is the discipline, this is the teacher's instruction. But the Brahma deities have not realized Nibbana. The mind states that determine their existence lack insight and wisdom. Being too deeply absorbed in their own existence, they cannot reflect upon or know the way things are. And you'll remember that, again, if you were here when I was talking about it, there's a very interesting sutta where the Buddha talks about the application of reflective thought and investigation as different states of absorption are developed. And it goes through the first 4 jhanas and then the first 3 of the formless jhanas. So that they and then each one of those, he says, and then the mind should reflect. This is conditioned and thus gross. This is something that is formed, it's conditioned, it's dependent. This is impermanent and unsatisfactory. But there is that which is beyond it. There the realization of Nibbana, which is beyond these. And so that reflective mind can be brought to bear on all of those states, all the way up until the highest of the formless jhanas, which is called neither perception nor non-perception. And then the one beyond that, which is called the cessation of perception and feeling, which is Nirodha Samapatti. And so then when the Buddha is explaining that, he said those states are too refined for that reflective mind to be brought to bear on that. It's too so intensely focused and too bright that the reflective mind can't function at that level of intense focus. And so that, but right up until those last two, even in the realms of infinite consciousness, in the realm of nothingness or the realm of infinite space, then still that mind can be brought to bear and to say, well, even this infinite consciousness, even this realm of no-thingness, this is impermanent, this is unsatisfactory, this is not self, but there is that which is beyond it. And so, at least in the meditation, that capacity of wisdom and the reflective mind can be brought to bear even in the presence of intense states of concentration, and the Buddha is encouraging that. And Ajahn Sucitto's comment here is saying that most Brahma deities don't even reflect that much, and that they are very absorbed in the sort of beauty and power and the bliss of their own experience, and so that the reflective mind doesn't often come into the picture. In Sutta number 11 of the Digha Nikaya, called the Kevada Sutta, a question arises in the mind of a meditating bhikkhu as to where the four elements cease. In other words, where is the place beyond all phenomena? He travels, presumably through psychic power, to various celestial realms, and is continually advised to seek his answer in a higher abode. So, and the wording of that, and it's actually the wording of the sutta says the pathway to the gods appears before that bhikkhu, and so he first of all ascends to the realm of the Bhuma Devas, the earth spirits, and then the realm of the four great kings, and then to the Tavatimsa heaven and Yama Devas, Sucitto, and so on. And each one of them he asks the question, where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind cease without remainder? That's the question as he asks it. Where is it that the four elements come to an end and are no more, cease and come to an end and cease to be? And each one of them refers, they say, oh, this is very profound, we don't understand that kind of thing, you better go upstairs and check with the Devas, so that they send him up from the four great kings up to the Tavatimsa, then up to the Yama Devas, Sucitto, and they keep saying, oh no, we don't understand that, that's profound philosophy, we don't know what the truth is, you better try up above. And so he gets referred all the way up as Luang Por Sumedho would describe, up the chain of command, up to the realm of the Brahma, Mahabrahma. And the retinue of Brahma and the ministers of Brahma similarly say, oh, we don't know, but the great Brahma is, great Brahma might possibly appear if you're patient and if you wait, and you can put that question to the great Brahma. So eventually he comes into the presence of the great Brahma, which is only the third of the 20 Brahma realms, but probably as high up as allows communication. However, the great Brahma, surrounded by devotees, can only respond to the question by extolling his own magnificence. He says, where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind fade out and cease to be? Where is it that they come to an end and cease without remainder? And then Mahabrahma says, I am Brahma, the great Brahma, the Almighty, the orderer of all things, the wielder of mastery, Lord and commander of all that are and are to be. In this very grandiose, kind of like sort of Jehovah-like declaration, you get this: I am the great one. I am the great one. And then the monk very politely says, "Well, thank you very much, but I didn't ask you that. What I asked was, where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind fade out and cease without remainder?" When questioned for the third time, the great Brahma takes the bhikkhu aside and says he doesn't know, but he can't admit that in the presence of the retinue. And he says, "You're embarrassing me in front of my subjects. Please. I don't know the answer, so stop making me look bad." The Brahma then admonishes the bhikkhu for seeking an answer to such a question from anyone but the Buddha. The Buddha, of course, puts the bhikkhu right by saying that the question should really be, where do the four elements not get established? So, where can they find no footing is another way of rendering it. Where can they not settle, or where do they find no sticking place? The answer is that they do not stick in the mind of someone who has no wish to attach to any mode of existence. When consciousness is in the rest state of cessation, the intentions and perceptions that define experience are not created. And this is one of Luang Por Sumedho's favourite passages in the Pali Canon, which people have probably heard him quote endlessly. And the English of it is, where consciousness is signless, boundless, all luminous, that's where earth, water, fire and air find no footing. There both long and short, and small and great, fair and foul, there name and form are wholly destroyed. With the cessation of consciousness, this is all destroyed. And the Pali for that is Vinyanang Anidasanang Anantang Sabato Pabang. And it's one of the very rare uses of the word Vijnana, which means a transcendent quality of awareness or knowing, rather than a discriminative, separative consciousness of that, discriminating this from that, one thing from another, but rather it's referring to the fundamental quality of awakened awareness. That's what Brahmas don't know, because they're attached to their refined state of being. And Ajahn Sucitto even blesses us with a drawing, his drawing of the great Brahma. Do please, it's not in the big hardback hand-drawn book, but it's in this Dawn of the Dhamma. So he did an illustration of the great Brahma here. It's kind of hard to describe, but you've got like a large eye in the center and the Sanskrit symbol for Om. You've got a few hands reaching out into the void here with little handlets pouring forth from them. You've got great swirls of light and ribbons of something or other weaving around the edges. So it's a sort of, I think it's harking back to Ajahn Sucitto's youth at Warwick University studying English and spending a lot of time illuminating his mind in various interesting ways. So it's a great imaginative splurge to come up with a drawing of the great Brahma. So if you take a look in that book, it's on page 153. This is a very, very significant teaching, and again, even though it's in the realm of speaking about deities and visiting different realms of being, it's very pertinent advice for Dhamma practice, because that what it is essentially talking about is that quality of awareness which provides no landing place for the sense world or for thoughts. It's say like a mirror reflects light, but the light that is reflected in the mirror doesn't taint or color or spoil the mirror in any respect. The mirror just reflects the light and is unbothered by that. It just it's not affected by whether the object is beautiful or ugly, whether it's large or small. It just reflects in a completely open and unbiased way. And so that this Vinyanang Anidasanang that Luang Por Sumedho would so often talk about is the quality of awakened awareness, which can know all things. It can know pleasure, it knows pain, it knows the pleasant, it knows the unpleasant, it knows the familiar, the unfamiliar, and that when that awareness is fully developed and is unbiased by greed, hatred, or delusion, then similarly it will know every experience without distortion and without identification. So it says, giving no footing to long and short and coarse and fine and pure and impure. What that it also means is that it's not making any kind of absolute judgment, so that it's not choosing the pure over the impure, or it's not saying or looking at something as being intrinsically long or intrinsically short or intrinsically large or small, but just it receives all of those impressions, it knows them, but without any kind of attachment or identification. So that it's a very good way of describing that what we can call the Buddha mind, or the in Thai they use the expression the one who knows, or the puru, the quality of knowing itself, unentangled knowing, and that these qualities of it, anidasana means invisible. Dasati is the word to see or vision. So anidasana means non-manifest or invisible or without form. Vinyanang anidasana anantang means limitless, infinite, without boundary. And then sabato pabang. Sabato means all or everywhere, and paba is light, so luminous everywhere. As he translates it. This is Maurice Walsh's translation, has it translated as all luminous. Or radiant in all directions. There's another interpretation of that word pabang, which refers to accessibility. So it's the word for a ford in a river, where you can cross a river by foot. You sort of walk through the water. The water is very shallow, and so it has the in that sense it means accessible from every side, completely. It can be forded from all directions. It can be crossed or entered from all directions. So in meditation, this is, in a sense, what vipassana is about developing, is that vinyanang anidasanang, that open heart, the open mind that's awake, that knows sounds outside, or feelings in the body, or thoughts in the mind, or the different sense impressions, memories, ideas, plans, moods, emotions, and knows that these are just passing patterns of organic change, patterns of consciousness arising and passing away, and they're all, every one of them are anicca, dukkha, anatta. They're unsatisfactory, impermanent, and not self. So that this is in a way describing the nature of mind when insight is fully developed, or the mind of the Arahant. That doesn't give a landing place or a footing, a place for those things or the thingness of an impression to be established, but the mind that knows this can only be a passing impression, a passing pattern of consciousness. That's what it is. There's also a very beautiful similar sutta where the Buddha uses the image of sunlight coming through the window of a house, and so say that you're in a house with a window in the eastern wall, and the sun rises in the east. Sun comes through the wall, and then he says, if the sunlight comes through the window in the morning, where does it land? And then the person he's talking to says, well, if it comes through the window, then it lands on the floor. He says, if there's no floor, then where does it land? Well, it lands on the water. Well, if there's no water, then where does it land? Well, it doesn't land. It's in exactly the same way that this is the quality of unsupported consciousness, that there is there's not a place for it to land, no thing for it to be defined around. There's no illusion of a separate individual entity who is the experiencer, but there's simply seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, remembering, imagining, arising and passing away. And so that then in that that quality of non-entanglement or non-attachment, then there's a tremendous freedom. So that as he says, that quality is boundless. That it's unlimited. So this Kevada Sutta, there's also another sutta in the Majjhima which is called an invitation to a Brahma, Brahma Nimantanika Sutta, and it's another one where the Buddha is meeting up with the Brahma god, and that same expression is used. Vijnana is used in that same way, and there's seem to be the only two places in the whole Pali Canon where that expression is used, and Vijnana is used in that way of a transcendent knowing. So it could be one of those passages that was somehow related to the mythology of Brahma gods, or relates to another Vedic scripture that talked about the words of a Brahma or the qualities of a Brahma, because that's only used in relationship to the Buddha having these conversations or talking about Brahma gods. So Ajahn Pasano's pet theory was that it was probably some kind of an expression for Vedas or an old scripture that the Buddha knew of, and was, as he often did, he'd taking another teaching from another source and then tweaking it to convey his own insight and his own understanding. So I think it's probably enough from me for the this first part today. So any questions, or there'll be anything useful to clarify on what I've been saying, or from the readings?
Ajahn, can I ask about Brahma's Sahampati, who asked Buddha to teach? Because I've heard different explanations of this fragment. Like one of them, that maybe it was added later because it's not in the Chinese agamas. That's what I've heard. I haven't checked it. and the other one I've heard was that this name Sahampati was the name of kind of disciple of the previous Buddha, to which this Buddha was a friend, and then he asked him to teach. I'm pretty interested in that fragment, and I'm interested in what could you say about it?
Well, I'm surprised that you say it's not in the agamas, because I know when, like, a city of 10,000 Buddhas, and there's monasteries of the Master Shuanhua's group. When they have a formal Dhamma talk, then the way that the Dhamma talk is requested is somebody takes a stick of incense and they walk 3 times around the shrine, and then they, at the end of the 3rd time, then, just as it describes in that request, they kneel down on their right knee and they bring their palms together and they repeat that same passage, but in Chinese. And so it was one of those things that I was particularly impressed. Like, oh, well, that's definitely the same, even with the physical gesture of kneeling down with the right knee on the ground and then that palms together, and saying, "Please, for the sake of those beings with a little dust in their eyes, please teach the Dhamma." So I'd be surprised if it's not in the agamas, because they didn't adopt that from the Pali. That was already the way they were doing it before having much connection with the Theravada tradition. I'm not sure of the exact mythology. I think that the Brahma Sahampati, I have heard that same story, that it was a bhikkhu, a being who was a bhikkhu in the lifetime of Kassapa Buddha, and has been reborn as in the Brahma world, and then that sort of special job is to make the request, and the mission is, when the next Buddha arrives, because you're going to have a very, very long lifespan, so that the next Buddha will come along quite soon in terms of your lifespan. So when he comes along and you pick up that thought from the next new Buddha, who will be Buddha Gautama, specializing in wisdom, when you pick up that thought, that there's no point trying to teach the Dhamma because nobody will understand, your mission is to head straight down and make the request. So I have heard that story before. I couldn't tell you exactly where. But also there's the term Lord of the Universe, Brahmacha Loka Adipati Sahampati. So that the title of that Brahma Sahampati has is something like the Father God figure, like the Lord of the Universe. And so it'd be, but it's a bit vague whether that means that Sahampati was from the Mahabrahma world or from a higher Brahma world. I've heard different interpretations of that, but that's the term is used, and so it works in with the mythology that the Buddha's enlightenment is only completed because of the the mother goddess, Dharani, being summoned forth to be his witness. The earth witness mudra is when he, after Mara's trying to attack him and dissuade him from enlightenment, then he calls forth Dharani, the earth goddess, to be his witness. And then, so his enlightenment is not, and his ability to be completely free of the assault of Mara is only completed because of the intervention or the arrival of the mother goddess, and then his role as a teacher only happens because of the influence of the father god, the creator god. So within the mythology, you've got those two elements that have to be there in order for him to be a Sammasambuddha, fully enlightened by himself and teaching, ready to teach and to start a new sasana and a sangha. So that exactly how that all hangs together, there's various different renderings of that, but that just in the words that we use for the Brahmacharloka, that invitation for a Dhamma talk, that's the way that the Sahampati is referred to as the Lord of the universe or the Lord of the world. Does that cover everything? Was there another bit in there that you asked about? Was there something else in there that you asked about I've forgotten?
No, I don't think so.
Well, by the way, I should apologize. I did get that wrong about the iconography at Borobudur. I was getting it mixed up with the ancient stupa at Amaravati in India, but Borobudur was 1,000 years after the stupa at Amaravati, and so in the Amaravati you never get the Buddha represented in human form. So there, the Buddha is represented by a pair of footprints, or by the Bodhi tree, or the space under the Bodhi tree, or by an empty chair. And I think even as a bodhisattva, then you see him riding. Well, you see the horse and somebody holding a parasol over the horse, but there's no rider on the horse. So that was in that era. That was before the Buddha was represented in human form. But then I took a look at some pictures from Borobudur, and the human form for the Buddha is used throughout that. So if you're editing these recordings, you can take that a little bit out.
I was
Yes.
surprised when I studied a little bit the values of the Borobudur, that the narrative of the life of the Buddha finishes basically after his teachings, after the
Dhammacakka Sutta.
Dhammacakka Sutta.
Yeah.
And then the whole development of the nuns order doesn't exist.
It is a bit strange. It's similar to Sir Edwin Arnold's Light of Asia. In that epic poem that was The Light of Asia, and it's very similar, whereby you have this long story of him growing up in the palace and then being motivated to leave the household life. 4 or 5 pages trying to tear himself away from Princess Yashodhara, and whether he should go, whether he should stay. And then the whole struggle for enlightenment, and then you get the enlightenment, and you think, hang on a minute, there's not very many pages left in this book. And you get the enlightenment, and then the whole of his teaching career of 45 years is just in a couple of pages. And then the parinibbana, and the dewdrop slips into the shining sea. So there seems to be some kind of pattern whereby that... I'm not sure why. It seems very strange to me, because you'd have thought his teaching career was the most important bit.
Well, I think it's a kind of different development of Buddhism, because then the next two, how do you say?
The next levels of the stupa, yeah.
Levels are full of various of the spiritual seeker who eventually then visits all the different Brahma worlds and the future Buddhas, and gets the highest teachings from the future Buddhas. So obviously the way that aimed for was not the Theravada way, but the kind of...
Oh, I see.
So obviously it's a different stage of the development of Buddhism, and probably influenced by China, because Borobudur Java is lying on the spice road.
I think it was Vajrayana Buddhism that was very dominant in Indonesia at that time, and I think you're probably right then that it just the Four Noble Truths was taken as the preliminary teaching, and then you have these other Vajra teachings that are piled on top of that. But maybe the Light of Asia is a whole different story. But it comes out in a similar way that most of the attention is on the run up, and then you don't get the main body of teachings or the development of the sasana.
But it's a little bit disappointing when you visit that place and then suddenly it stops. I think there might be one or two areas of the passing away of the Buddha.
I think so, yeah. Well, continuing with the chapter on formless rapture, and we just concluded at that quotation from the Kevada Sutta, where consciousness is signless, boundless, all luminous. That's where earth, water, fire, and air find no footing. They're both long and short, and small and great, fair and foul. Their name and form, Namarupa, are wholly destroyed. With the cessation of consciousness, this is all destroyed. So just to say another couple of words about that before continuing. In a different translation of that, that term, this is all destroyed, it comes from the Pali verb rujati, which also means to contain or to hold in check. And so both, I think in I.B. Horner's translation and Bhikkhu Nyanananda's translation, then they render it as something like, with the cessation of consciousness, or they are all things are held in check therein, so that that term cessation of consciousness sounds like you're going unconscious, like you're blanking out, but it's rather than the sort of cessation as being the stopping there, that nirujati is in a way the containment of consciousness, or the holding of that in check, so that in a way that it's describing that quality of say in a way the thingness of an experience, the thingness of the solidity that the mind gives to a sound or a sight or a thought or a sense object or an opinion, that is what is ending, that is in a way the limitations of that are being recognized. So it's as I said, this is one of Luang Por Sumedho's favorite passages in the suttas, and it's really worth a lot of contemplation. But that so it's also worth considering what that means. And I think in the island, if I remember correctly, it's in the this chapter, knowing emptiness and the radiant mind. So the if I'm remembering correctly, which I'm probably not, no, it's in the it's here. It's actually in a different chapter, unsupported and unsupportive consciousness, and where it's also a passage from the Udana where water, earth, fire, and wind have no footing. Their stars do not shine. The sun is not visible. The moon does not appear. Darkness is not found. And when a sage, a worthy one through wisdom, has known this for themselves, then from form and name, from pleasure and pain, they are freed. So that's a related passage, and is also worthy of consideration. So when something ceases, we tend to think of it as something that has begun and that then it stops. But the word nirodha also means the non-arising, or the holding in check. So when we say cessation or stopping, that's again, it's one of those words that the English has a particular tone to it. But nirodha and then the Pali verb nirujjati, it has a different set of qualities. So the translation by Bhikkhu Nyanananda is, "Where do earth, water, fire and wind, long and short, fine and coarse, pleasant and unpleasant, no footing find? Where is it that name and form are held in check, with no trace left? Consciousness which is non-manifestative, endless, lustrous on all sides, here it is that earth and water, fire and wind, no footing find. Here again are long and short, subtle and gross, pleasant and unpleasant, name and form, all cut off without exceptions. When consciousness comes to cease, these are held in check herein." That's Bhikkhu Nyanananda, who's a great Sri Lankan monk, and wrote books like Concept and Reality and The Magic of the Mind. And so that's if you want to read a bit more about that, then it's in this chapter called Unsupported and Unsupportive Consciousness, in this book I shamelessly self-promote, that I put together with Ajahn Pasno and wrote a few years ago. So there's more on that if you want to look at that particular passage in there and to think about it a little more, which I highly recommend. The other thing I wanted to go over a bit before we start, so during this whole sequence of the last few days, going through the different realms of Buddhist cosmology, and then they've all got these long Pali names like Paranimitta Vasavati or Chatu Maharajika and so on, and it's very easy for people to get lost in the lengthy collections of syllables and not have a clear picture. So if you want to have an easy snapshot of the Buddhist cosmology, then the Digha Nikaya, Morris Walsh's translation of the Buddha's long discourses, has got a very handy part of its introduction called Cosmology, and it lists the whole collection of realms, and it sort of starts off at the top and works down. So you have realm number 31, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, and the devas, or the Brahma gods that live there, are the Neva Sanya, Nasanya, Sanyayatupaga Deva, and so it goes through the each of the realms, so that as I was saying, you have if we start at the bottom, the hell realms, and then the asuras are the next lowest, then the hungry ghosts, then the animal world, and then the human world, which is the Manusa Loka. Then next up is the devas of the four great kings, and the 33 gods, the Yama devas, the Sucitto devas, the heaven of the contented, then the devas who delight in creation, and the devas who wield power over others' creations, or who delight in the other creations. So those bottom 11 worlds, those 11 lokas, they are the Kama Loka, or the sense desire realm. And then up above that you have the Brahma world. So you have a lot more Brahma worlds. So you have 11 realms in the Kama Loka, and then 20 realms in the Brahma world. So the first one, as I was saying yesterday, you've got the retinue of Brahma, then the ministers of Brahma, and then great Brahmas. Then the devas of limited radiance, the devas of unbounded radiance, and the devas of streaming radiance. Those are the ones that correspond to second jhana. Then you have the devas of limited glory and unbounded glory. Those relate to third jhana, and then devas of refulgent glory and very fruitful devas. Those are related to the fourth jhana. and they've all got their various different Pali names. Then you have the Asanyasata Brahma realm, the realm of unconscious beings. Sanya is perception or consciousness. Asanya is no perception or unconscious. So the realm of unconscious beings. And then you have the 5 that relate to that are called the Suddhavasa, the 5 pure abodes. Again, that I was talking about. So those are the 5 realms that anagamis, those who are non-returners, that they are born into one of those 5 realms. So you have the Avihad Brahma realm, the Atapa Dhamma realm, the Sudasi, and then the Akanita Devas. So they are the Devas not falling away, the untroubled Devas, the beautiful or clearly visible Devas, the clear-sighted Devas, and the peerless Devas. And then up above those, the top 4 realms are the Arupa, the formless Brahma realms, where the beings in those realms are just only mind, they have no form whatsoever. And so those relate to the 4 kinds of Arupa jhana. So it's all handily there, pages 38 and 39 in Maurice Walsh's translation of the Digha Nikaya. And he gives you handy explanations and a little commentary on all the different realms and devas, how to recognize a yaka, what to do with a garuda, a giant eagle if you meet one, and nagas and so on. So that there's a handy, over about 10 pages, a very easy and digestible description of those realms. If you want more, then in the library we have got a wonderful book. It's actually the first book that was written in the Thai language, that was called The 3 Worlds According to King Ruang. And it's an English translation of it, usefully. And that has a very, very thorough description of all the different realms, from the human realm, the animal realm, the hell realms, the heavenly realms, and all the different characteristics in much more detail, with these sort of lengths of lifespans and the intensity of burning in the various hells and so on. But Maurice's description, he's a very accessible and skillful writer, so I would recommend, if you do want to find out a bit more, then there in the introduction to the Digha Nikaya is where you'll find everything that's useful. So just put that into the mix. So to carry on with Ajahn Sucitto's illuminating and illuminated commentary. Fascination with special, quote-unquote, energies, auras and refined powers of the mind makes you feel special, and consequently you invest a lot of interest and significance in those states. Then you find kinship with other special people who are attuned to that level, and, consciously or not, the kinship reinforces your specialness. So you get stuck in a self-view as big as Mount Meru. You don't want to let go of it and see it as just another condition, because it's uplifting to be special and fascinating. Surely enlightened beings must be special and fascinating. No, enlightened beings are the only totally ordinary beings. So this is a very back in the old days. This was a very, very common theme of Lumpur Sameta's teaching. So he, like many accomplished Dhamma teachers, he would have a particular theme or a riff that he would use for a year or two. And so back in the days of repairing Chithurst House in the early 80s, one of his themes that he regularly repeated is, what is it that Buddhas know that unenlightened beings don't know? And with the implication that, well, Buddhas must have this fantastically comprehensive knowledge of all gazillion worlds and all different dimensions of sort of fantastic experience and profound insight and blazing visions of other realms. So obviously Buddhas have a sort of fantastically vast multi-dimensional cosmic vision. That's what you're expecting, but then the answer would be, what Buddhas know that unenlightened beings don't know is that all that arises passes away and is not self. So it's a deliberate letdown. Like, that's all? And so and also he would make that point of, if you think an enlightened being is actually the only kind of totally ordinary being. And so Ajahn Sucitto underscores that here. Surely enlightened beings must be special and fascinating? No. Enlightened beings are the only totally ordinary beings. So in this light, it's also good to consider the nature of sanity according to Buddhist psychology. So in the West, if you are capable of, if you're functional in society, like you can go out in the street and you can walk along and you don't upset people or get arrested or cause a traffic jam, then you're considered sane, that you can cope, that you're sort of manageable, you can manage your way through a day, you can feed yourself, you can clothe yourself, you can have a conversation that makes reasonable sense, and then you're called sane. So in terms of Buddhist psychology, that's not the standard of sanity. Arahantship is the standard of sanity. Anything below arahantship is a state of madness. So it shifts the bar quite substantially. So this is the psych ward, unless I'm surrounded by arahants. Anything so? So that's I'm making light of it somewhat, but I'm not in some other respects, not at all, because if you consider that this is the psych ward and that you are surrounded by people who are crazy, and you yourself have got a lot of crazy problems and tendencies, then you find yourself being a lot more forgiving and accommodating to the people that you're with. But what we suffer from is that, and if you read the newspapers or hear news reports, we expect everyone to behave like arahants. And then we're shocked and amazed and disappointed and hurt when they don't. When somebody lies to us, or a politician doesn't tell the truth because they want to get something for themselves. They took advantage of their position, and they lied about their expenses. Gosh, how could they do that? Well, they're not an arahant. That's how. That people break precepts. People are not totally scrupulous. I'm not condoning people lying about their expenses or whatever, but I'm not saying it's a good thing, but just saying it's not surprising that people do that because they're not arahants. That people are selfish, they're jealous, they're aggressive, they're lazy, they're obsessive about their possessions, their status. That's life in the psych ward. Of course people do that kind of stuff, and because we're all crazy. So we believe in things really belong to us. We believe that we're somebody special. We believe that we're an awful person, and so on and so forth. And so it's a very skillful and say a powerful support for mindfulness, and particularly in human relations, to be bearing that in mind. That in terms of the Buddhist view of things, sanity only comes with the total ending of greed, hatred, and delusion. Even an anagami is still slightly crazy. Even an extreme enterer is slightly crazy, somewhat crazy. And so that when you shift the bar to that level, then you find yourself much more forgiving of your own shortcomings. Not that you're just making excuses. Well, I'm crazy, so therefore I can just act on my impulses, and you just have to get over it. It's not taking advantage of that in foolish ways, but when we judge ourselves for being lazy or being confused or being obsessive or riddled with anger or doubt or having lustful thoughts or hateful thoughts or jealous thoughts, just to remember, well, I'm on the psych ward. I've got a lot of shortcomings. This is normal. There's nothing fundamentally wrong or bad. It's just I'm not an arahant yet. So that these impulses seem very convincing. These views and habits, and so that's why when he says an arahant, an enlightened being, they are totally ordinary. It's like, oh, a sane person. Good heavens. And so that also that we tend to glorify arahants, and also the kind of mythology that's grown up over the years around an arahant, so that you get some accounts from the commentarial teachings that say, an arahant doesn't actually tread on the ground; that their feet just only go about a quarter of an inch above the ground, so they wouldn't tread on any insects. It's like, no. You even have the account of the Buddha walking and leaving footprints in the dust. It's like that's right there in the suttas. But later accounts that the whole idea of arahants just having ordinary bodies and eating and urinating and defecating and so on is don't say that. You can't think in those terms, but it's very much the case that an arahant, as it says, is a fully accomplished being, completely normal. And also, when you would meet someone like Luang Por Chah, that would be something that's very striking. Obviously, there was a sense of very powerful presence and clarity and stability there. But that was a very striking feature. It's like a completely normal bloke. It's like there was absolutely wonderfully ordinary and uncomplicated, and also not trying to create a particular impression or wanting you to think about them. And if you read the teachings or hear the teachings of people who are recognized as being highly accomplished, that's a quality that usually comes across, is that how straightforward and down to earth and natural and at ease they are, and not trying to put across and make any kind of particular impression or wanting to be seen in a certain way. And Luang Por Chah was very very good at that. As soon as somebody was besotted with him or getting over devotional, he just almost automatically he'd take out his teeth and hand them to his attendant to clean. And then his sort of lips would sort of fold in over his gums, and he just sort of carry on the conversation through his toothless mouth, and see what you did with that. Or he, just do things to deflate you and to make you not exalt him. And I think a few days ago I was talking with someone about how when maybe it was one of the readings when Luang Por Sumedho came to Luang Por Chah with a long collection of faults that he thought that Luang Por Chah had, and that he thought the other monks were being a bit too cautious, and the Thai expression is grengjai, like nervous or hesitant about bringing up, so that as a straightforward American who likes to tell it like it is, then he gave Luang Por Chah this list of things that were wrong with him, and so Luang Por Chah he was sort of quite amused and happy to hear all this, and said, well, perhaps it's a good thing I'm not perfect, Sumedho, otherwise you'd be looking for the Buddha somewhere outside your own mind. So, everyone is special in some way or another, with their unique special problems and sensitivities. Enlightened beings are those who realize ultimate truth as totally ordinary, as the way it is. However much they demonstrate and praise the qualities of wisdom, they don't think of themselves as anything in personal terms. And this is a quote from the Sutta Nipata. The wise man does not rate himself with the distinguished, the lowest, nor with ordinary people. Calm and unselfish, he is free from possessiveness. He holds on to nothing and rejects nothing. I think that's the verse. Ajahn Chittapala, you have that at the bottom of all your emails, is that right? Or a different translation of the same passage? Is that right?
It's not quite the same, but
it's from the Sutta Nipata.
Yeah, I have changed it. But
oh, okay. But anyway, it's like that. The wise person does not conceive themselves in any particular way, and there's different renditions of this. This passage from the Sutta Nipata. There's also one in the Itivuttaka, where the Buddha says there's these three kinds of conceit: conceiving of yourself as better than, conceiving yourself as the same as, or conceiving yourself as worse than. And a wise person doesn't conceive themselves as any one of those three. And in even more detail, in the Nidana, then it goes through what's called the ninefold matrix of conceit. So if you are better than others and you think you're better, or you are better and you think you're the same as, or if you are better and you think you're worse than, those are all three kinds of conceit. If you think think that you're the same as, but you're actually better, if you think you're the same as and you're actually the same as, if you think you're the same as and you're actually worse than, that's the next three kinds of conceit. And then the last three, as you can probably guess, is if you are worse than and you think that you're better, if you are worse than and you think you're the same as, or if you are worse than and you think that you're worse than, those are the last three kinds of conceit. So conceiving yourself as anything, or ranking yourself as better, worse, or equal, any kind of conceiving is always wide of the mark. And there's this beautiful phrase, hold on to nothing and reject nothing. The Buddha didn't even bother to refer to himself as a person at all. When questioned as to who he was, Deva or Brahma or human, he refuted them all and said, I am awake. So this is Brahmin, again, this is where the Buddha's footprints came into the picture. This Brahmin called Dona was walking on the road and he saw these extraordinary footprints with a circular pattern in them and a 1,000-spoke wheel that sort of formed into the dust, and thought, wow, whose footprints are these? And then he followed them off the road and saw this monk sitting under a tree, and went over and knelt down nearby and addressed the Buddha and said, and he was just amazed at this extraordinary figure, so sort of serene and sitting, meditating under this tree, and obviously there was a great sense of power and radiance. And he said, excuse me, are you a Deva? And the Buddha said, no. Are you a Brahma? No. Are you a Yaka? No. Are you a human being? No. Are you some kind of other sort of heavenly spirit of some sort? No. And then he said, well, may I ask, what are you? And he said, remember me as one who is awake. Buddho. And so that's in a way, that's why we use the word Buddha to refer to the great teacher, is that's how he referred to himself. And as Ajahn Sucitto goes on to say, the quality of awakeness is brought to the foreground and the personal form is not mentioned. The Buddha constantly notes, but I did not let the pleasure that came from this realization take over my mind. That's the great difference between the bliss of awakening and the Brahma Loka. The Brahma gods are always affirming their identity and lingering in the bliss of their sphere. The mind loses its discernment and sense of investigation, and the bliss is worshipped in its own right. People love these high states of mind, tend to idolize them, and idolize beings who attain them. But notice in the picture that the Dhamma wheel has almost disappeared. It's a vague glow, and there's a strange mudra in the center of the glow that's become a meaningless gesture. So that's referring to his painting here, that the hands in the Dhammacakka mudra are also almost disappearing in the brightness, and the wheel has turned into a few fragmented rays of light blazing out from the fading hands. That's all that's left of the Dhamma wheel in the picture. I equate this image with the worship of an ultimate being, which places the experience of the ultimate beyond the possibility of personal realization. One can have some experience of the bliss of not being involved with the sense realm from this calm, or simply by believing in this heavenly being. But it limits the direct experience or investigation of Dhamma. Okay, I'll read that again, just to get that clear. One can have some experience of the bliss of not being involved with the sense realm from this calm. So that from that calm state, and that mind's one-pointedness and blissful feeling, then that sense of, great, I don't have to feel, I don't have to think, don't have to deal with all those grubby people. Bliss. Kind of enjoyment of disengagement is, or simply believing in this heavenly being. But it limits the direct experience or investigation of Dhamma. So the bliss of the Brahmas is one akin to suspended animation rather than transcendence through penetration of the sense realm. In the long run, the good karma that keeps the Brahma afloat runs out. unresolved attachments begin to have their effect, because they've not been transformed through insight into not-self. In formless rapture, we lose spiritual definition to the extent where even morality and reason become secondary to the experience of with the great Brahma. So I'll read that again. In formless rapture, we lose spiritual definition to the extent where even morality and reason become secondary to the experience of being with the great Brahma. So that sense of bliss and brightness and clarity, it's like the reflective mind switches off because you're just having such a good time sunbathing. It's like, this is great. So that's there's a switching off and a sort of a day at the beach mentality. The Brahma Loka are easy to fake also because they do not allow any criteria outside of their realm to be brought to bear. They support an attitude of unquestioning devotion. That attitude has an attraction, but it means we can be unquestioningly devoted to some fake Brahmas. The so-called transcendent one, capital T, capital O, may even transcend loftiness. It's all Dhamma, sleeping Buddhas, fighting Buddhas, drinking beer and watching TV Buddhas. This is very much for a Californian audience. That's the interpretation of the formless realms that the unawakened mind can make. We seek out the refined pleasure but neglect the skillful actions that give rise to those refined states of being. So you'll remember I was talking about that sutta in the Majjhima that it's called Reappearance Through Aspiration, and it talks about how to be reborn in these different celestial realms, in the realm of these devas, or the Brahma realms, or the realm of the 100,000-fold Brahma. And then there's this catch in there for each of those states. It says this is for the virtuous, not for the unvirtuous. So you have to have you've got to have cash in the bank to make to in a way employ that intention, or have that intention actualized. Because if there isn't the paramita, there isn't the good karma that's been created, then even the intention to, oh, may I be reborn in that high realm, if you haven't got the paramita, the sort of spiritual backup, then that intention can't possibly come to fruition. So that, and this is, as I said, this book was somewhat intended, originally this was intended to be released for the opening of the Vihara in San Francisco in 1992. Well, the book didn't get printed till 1994, and the Vihara didn't happen until 1996. So, but it was somewhat crafted for a US audience, and so in the Bay Area, that kind of attitude of sleeping Buddha, angry Buddha, selfish Buddha, Buddha at the disco is a not an uncommon kind of relationship to the ideas of freedom. So people like that sort of freewheeling, do as you will kind of attitude, and that there's quite a number of different spiritual groups in the Bay Area that have adopted and still do adopt that are very popular. A little story I might tell that also relates to our good friend and mentor, Master Xuan Hua, was one of those very freewheeling spiritual groups in the Bay Area back in the late 60s, was led by this character called Sufi Sam, who was I think he was some kind of a professional. He's like a lawyer or a doctor or an architect or something. And but he bailed out of his professional, comfortable middle-class life and become a sort of Sufi hippie guru. And he had a lot of devotees. And they were, it's very much, do whatever you feel like. If it feels good, do it. And it's all sort of in the spirit of liberation. And so he was a sort of like a hippie guru type. And then he died, I think, during some evening session. He managed to stumble downstairs and had a fall and died from the injuries he got from this fall from a balcony or from down some stairs, I believe in some kind of altered state when he demised. And then what happened was that about 7 or 8 of his students all had a dream of him that night after he died. And And they all had the same, this is a true story, and they all had a very, very similar dream. And in that dream, Sufi Sam, their beloved guru, came to them and said, everything I told you about sex, drugs and rock and roll being the way to liberation, forget it, I was totally wrong, I was leading you down a really stupid path, so stop that. And if you want to go and find a really good spiritual teacher, there's this Chinese monk who lives in an old mattress factory down in the Mission District. It's called Gold Mountain Monastery, go there. And so these various students of his, because they were quite traumatized after their teacher's death, and so they were, people were sort of gathering together and trying to plan what to do next. And so over breakfast, or early that next day, a few of them got together and said, "Yeah, I had this really strange dream about the master last night." I said, "Yeah, me too. Yeah, it was he came in my dream. And what did he say?" And they, chatting with each other, they found out they all had the same dream. They thought, "Well, who's this Chinese monk?" And nobody'd ever heard of him. And he's down in the Mission District. Okay, so they went down to Mission and 16th, I think it was, where the old Gold Mountain Monastery was, and this whole bunch of hippies showed up at Gold Mountain Monastery and sort of with their kind of long hair and beads and kaftans and cheesecloth dresses, and saying, "We want to be your disciple." And so that entered into one of Master Wa's regular Dhamma talks. He said, "Well, why have you all come here?" I said, "Well, our teacher who died yesterday told us last night that we all had to come here, and that we should take refuge with you." And he said, "Oh, well, I'm very strict, you know." I said, "Oh, well, how do you mean strict?" "Well, like no sex, no drugs, no rock and roll, and vegetarian." And to their credit, quite a few of them did take refuge with him and became his students. But it was one of those notable stories that they were right out of this sort of standard mold of the kind of do what thou wilt kind of freedom, and that it is something that our desire mind really wants to hear. But the whole understanding of what freedom is rather than defying conventions and freedom coming from following desires, that what the Buddha's path is pointing to, and what the Master Xuanhua was able to help them understand, is freedom comes from not being a victim of desires, and not being a victim of your aversions and your fears. Freedom is not from defying convention, but from understanding that and finding those qualities within, and then keeping the precepts and living skillfully and training yourself in meditation. Those are the things that are really going to help, rather than just trying to find freedom through endless partying. And I can also vouch for that myself. So those people who make an identity out of refined levels of consciousness are apt to use that sense of being the great Brahma, the Bodhisattva, the next Buddha, and the rest of it for corrupt ends. When this happens, as can be noted in several contemporary cases, self-view keeps justifying the indulgence. The burden of self-view is like a lead weight, and if left unchecked, it can drag one's consciousness down to the realms of hell, generally with a few fascinated disciples in tow. So, there's not so many self-proclaimed gurus around, but back in the 70s and 80s, it was there was quite a lot. It was the Maitreya Buddha was there were a few Maitreyas. I think it was about 4 or 5 Maitreyas all at once, and Jesus was going to reappear in Brick Lane, and there was a guy called what was his name? There was an Australian guy, Barry Long, who took out a full-page advert in The Guardian that said, "I am Guru," and he was advertising himself as a sort of totally enlightened master. And I think he had about 5 wives, and then Da Frijong, or Da Lavananda, Da Avabhasa, he had, I think, about 9 wives. Somehow the celibacy doesn't quite make it into total enlightenment in that kind of freewheeling mode of spirituality. Anyway, to continue. Devotion takes many forms, some of them refined and some coarse. I've seen people get into devotional highs over football teams. Indeed so. However, whether it's high or low, devotion without investigation produces a rapturous energy in the mind of the devotee, but not much else. And investigation without devotion falls short of the full appreciation of Dhamma. Instead of that wholehearted knowing that unifies heart and mind, without devotion, we cultivate an intellectual analysis of conditioned phenomena, the structure of the world and the self. Some aspect of our mind is always standing apart. The result is a lack of heart and a self, quote-unquote, acting as an onlooker. So the other day I was talking about how with the 5 spiritual faculties, you have mindfulness at the center, and then the two ends you have faith and wisdom. So that faith and wisdom have to balance each other, and then the next 2 in, concentration and energy, virya and samadhi, then they balance each other, and then sati, mindfulness, is at the center. So he's talking here about saddha, devotion or faith, and panya, or wisdom or intelligence. They need to be in a state of balance with each other. Even dedicated insight meditators get stuck at this arid level, and may suddenly abandon their decade of practice to sit at the feet of a guru who offers great presence and expects complete surrender to his will. To go beyond the pitfalls of the absence or misdirection of devotion, we have to abandon our intellectual detached stance and leap in faith, not to a person, but into the center of the apparent world. With insight, devotion helps us to open to conditions and stop hanging on to our perceptions, and can take us beyond our self-view. Without devotion, we remain on the sidelines of truth. If devotion is fettered by ignorance, it breeds attachment to objects of faith, special people, rituals, hobbies, even football teams. The wise use of devotion is not to form or formlessness, or any level of sensual or non-sensual becoming. These are the shortfalls of the Devata mentality. But when faith is balanced with wisdom, and concentration is balanced by energy, as I was saying, and when that balance is preserved by mindfulness, our insightful knowing can penetrate the changing and unsatisfactory nature of appearances and not seek to gain, become, or annihilate anything. Then a fortunate fruition of the spiritual faculties takes place. And then there's a quote from the Book of the Fives, for Samyutta Nikaya, on the section on the 5 faculties. When these 5 faculties are maintained, being, and developed, they merge in the deathless, reach to the deathless, and end in the deathless. The Buddha, as the teacher and human exemplar of enlightenment, is a catalyst for our faith. But the giving of ourselves is to the Dhamma that we can experience through this body and mind. Complete cultivation sustained through body, speech and mind is the supreme devotion. And then from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, whatever monk, nun, male or female lay follower dwells practicing the Dhamma properly and perfectly fulfills the Dhamma way, he or she honours the Tathagata, reveres and esteems him, and pays him the supreme homage. To make that offering, we have to return to where we are, seeing it no longer as self and the world, but as the realm of Dhamma. So in that last quotation that Ajahn Sucitto uses from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, this is one of those instances where Venerable Ananda is sort of waxing lyrically. He's saying, this is amazing, this is incredible. The sala trees in the forest here have burst out into bloom, and it's not their season for flowering. And the air is filled with the sound of celestial musicians, and the mandarava blossoms are raining down, these celestial flowers are raining down from the sky, from the heavenly realms. And it's amazing, it's incredible. Never before has the Blessed One been so honoured, so revered, so has such devotion and reverence been showed towards the Blessed One. And so he's sort of getting off on this sort of, this is amazing, this is incredible, this is fantastic. It's never before has anyone ever seen anything like this. And then the Buddha said, yes, it's true, that this is unique in all these different things happening, all these devas appearing and singing, and the flowers raining down from the sky and so on. But if a disciple really wants to revere the Tathagata, then what they do is follow his instructions. So flowers and candles and offerings are easy, but to actually do what the teacher advises, often asking too much, that you actually follow the instructions. But that's exactly what it's part of that dynamic between the Buddha and Ananda. He's often taking Ananda down a peg or two, and Ananda gets a bit overexcited, which I can relate to. But he's pointing out, if you really want to show devotion, you really want to please the teacher, nothing pleases someone who's in the role of a teacher more than someone actually listening to what they've said, following their advice, and then benefiting from that advice. Like, wow, how fantastic. They can come with armfuls of flowers and beautiful offerings and make sort of glorious shrines, but if they're still caught up in self-view, or if they're still obsessed with you as a guru, what's it worth, really? It's a nice gesture, but more useful is the person who's looked at their self-view, looked at their attachments, their fears, their insecurities, their jealousies and their desires. They say, oh, this is stuff that needs to be practiced with. And it's not saying that flowers and incense and candles and such and offerings are out of place, but the real act of devotion is to practice the Dhamma. As he says, whatever monk, nun, male or female lay follower, dwells practicing the Dhamma properly and perfectly fulfills the Dhamma way, he or she honors the Tathagata, reveres and esteems him, and pays him the supreme homage. So that brings us to the end of that chapter. So those of you who've been struggling with all this stuff about Deva realms, you can breathe out again now. Whew. Thank goodness that's over. No one of these bloody Nagas and Yakas and Brahmas and Devas and all of that stuff. So we can carry on with the real teaching. But that'll be for another time. And so I'll leave it there for the moment, but if people have any questions or reflections, comments, please don't be shy.
I just want to say something rather mundane. This morning I had a short conversation with Manos. With Manos. She said something, I can't believe that it's not 2 weeks left from the winter retreat, and I said, well, you're falling out of Deva. Out of the Deva realms. So, just contemplating the ending of it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I really find that we forget about it, how fortunate we are, that we have this time where we can focus inward and have not so many, even this and the support, not have so many duties. Mm-hmm. And how to use it, really.
Yeah. We can also take it for granted that Lumpur Cha set out from his village monastery and wanted to discover the truth. And we can take it for granted that this American out of the Peace Corps showed up in 1967 and said, please teach me. And that he had the great energy and skill and kindness to come and try and settle in the West, and that all of these monasteries exist. This is not a given. We forget that. So we think, Amaravati is there. It's only here because Lumpur Cha, as a young man, was compelled or impelled by the desire to understand. To end suffering, and as he made this adhitthana, whatever it takes in this life, I'm going to do everything possible to arrive at understanding that this life, I'm not going to let anything stand in my way, that this is what I'm going to give myself to. Because he made that adhitthana when he was like 30 years old, or 28 years old, whatever it was. Here we are. Amaravati exists. Chitta Viveka exists. This community exists. None of this would be here if he hadn't had that resolve and then hadn't carried it through. So, because it's very easy to say, Amaravati, I've got to go to the morning chanting, grumble. How do they do that to the cabbage? Don't they know how to cook properly? Grumble. Oh no, I haven't got to be on clean up again today. Grumble. And you completely forget that you're in this astonishingly rare paradise. That it's amazing that this tradition exists in the world. These teachings are even known about, and that you have an environment of people who want to practice and want to live in this way. This is incredible. Really, it's it just boggles the mind that this whole environment of Dhamma practice exists and is sustained, and you can just show up and join in. Wow, incredible, amazing, and it's free. So it's so easy to get taken up with, oh yeah, but I got this problem with my meditation, or well, I got this funny feeling in my leg that's kind of not quite right. But we forget we're in this sort of jewel palace of Dhamma, and it's incredible that the Buddha, the Buddha's enlightenment and his understanding 2,500 years later is still resonating through the world, and that these great beings have picked up on that and have actualized it and embodied it and been able to pass it on to us. And here we are, we can live in it, be it, and our opportunity is right here, every day, presented for us. So I fully support your appreciation, but also it's just because I remember when I first showed up in Thailand, I knew nothing about Buddhism. I never even heard of Theravada or Mahayana. I'd never heard of Ajahn Chah the day before I showed up at Wat Pananachart. And then arriving there and just sort of getting inspired and interested, and then going to see, living in Wat Pananachart and visiting Wat Bapong. And after a few months, I began to have this sense of, what holds this all together? This is all totally voluntary. What's the center of gravity here? Because why does everybody show up and just live in this incredibly rigorous, demanding way? What holds it together? Why doesn't it just sort of scatter and dissolve? And then realizing, oh, it's that that little man in the middle. That's because of his great paramita and wisdom that he's managed to create an environment of sort of spiritual cultivation. And that what an amazing thing. And that there wasn't a Wat Bapong that he moved into. It was just one little guy in a forest. Yeah. And that was, and just through that, the strength of that and that commitment. So and I also realized, amazing. I've been here for about 4 or 5 months, and it never crossed my mind. I just thought the institution is here, and I'd grown up living in institutions, schools and colleges and such. And, oh no, the institution is the people, and the people are only here because they want to be here. And that sense of how extraordinary that that environment is, and how it's through the individual faith and commitment of the people who show up. That's what the monastery is. If we all left, there wouldn't be a monastery here. It'd be a collection of buildings. But the monastery is the people. It's not the physical structures. So I especially when we have this whole big development plan going on, I try to keep reminding myself of that development of Amaravati is the humans, and the buildings are just the wrapping. Yes, Michelle.
I'm one of those people that struggles a bit with all the Deva realms. But I was reading some of the books, the Ajahn Chah books we've got in Kurdistan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was here last month and I was flipping through them, and some of them do become a bit complicated for me, sort of simplicity and, quite earthy girl. My favourite story in there was Toilets on the Path. And it just really spoke to me about the simplicity of doing really simple things for yourself and for other people. The fact that he was giving everybody a bollocking in that story was really real. That really made it something that's, look, this is what you can do talking about this stuff here that's intangible that I'm sure might well be there, but it just feels a little bit out of my comfort zone to kind of, all my kind of imagining being very kind of Western black country girl. So that was a real grounder for me. And there's a nice passage at the beginning of it that one of the monks had written to say they included it because it's quite different to the rest of the passages that are much more heartfelt, and they don't even know the right words for what they are, but they're very different. There's a different kind of approach or feeling you get from them. They're almost, actually, I'm really fed up with you all because you're just not doing what I'm asking you to do.
Yeah, but he always used to.
Yeah.
Well, he used to say, if you want to know how good a monastery is, don't bother listening to the Ajahn. Go and check the toilets.
Yeah, and I would say, I work in care, and I had to do stuff for people that can't do it for themselves. And when you have people around you that are able and they don't do that for themselves, it speaks volumes about where their mind is. So that was sort of spot on for me.
Well, also he tried to counteract superstition very directly. So, I mean, the only reason I've been talking a lot about devas and brahmas and such like is because there's that whole section in the Dhammacakka Sutta that refers to it. But generally, when people tried to, or that there were members of the community who were obsessed with that kind of thing, or really into amulets, or wanted sort of special kinds of protection, or they were they were meditating because they wanted to see devas and such like. Yeah, you would get really short shrift. I mean, you'd really get the treatment, and you'd be on toilet cleaning for the next couple of months, for sure. Because people love that sort of weird and wonderful stuff. But it's also like I was saying the other day, how the Buddha said there's two different kinds of miracle. There's the miracle of psychic power and flying through the air or seeing into past lives, and there's the miracle of instruction. People are far more interested in psychic powers than they are in instruction. But he's saying that's the superior miracle is instruction. The fact that you can hear some words and that they can have an impact on your mind and change your whole way of seeing and being, and catalyze the liberation of the heart. That's a real miracle. The fact that someone has a vision of a past life, or they see an aura, or they can have a conversation with a deva, well, so what? People can open up an iPad and watch a TV program, or see plenty of pictures of all kinds of devas and brahmas. So what? But the real miracle is, wow, we can hear some words and they can trigger a change of vision and a change of attitude that's genuinely and irreversibly liberating. Wow, that's worthy of praise. And that there's another incident very like when he takes Ananda down a peg or two, and Ananda's getting all frothy about the devas singing and the flowers raining down from the sky and so on. And the Buddha says, well, if you really want to praise the Tathagata, you follow his instructions. There's a very similar incident where Ananda is describing all of the miraculous things that happened around the Buddha's birth, and how his mother didn't experience any discomfort, and when he was born, and the devas caught him, and cool and warm water appeared from the sky and bathed him as soon as he was born, and he walked and spoke immediately after his birth, and 7 lotus flowers popped up from the ground under his feet, and then he said, I am foremost in the world, I'm the leader of the world. And the Buddha, and after each one of those statements, then Ananda said, this is one of the wonderful and marvelous qualities of the Blessed One. And then the Buddha shows up and says, as he usually does, well, what was it you were talking about when I arrived? Because when he shows up, then the conversation stops. But he would almost always say, well, what was it you were talking about? What was the talk that I interrupted when I arrived? And so Ananda repeated the whole exposition he'd been giving about this kind of wonderful, all these wonderful, this long string of wonderful and marvelous qualities. And the Buddha said, "Well, do you want to hear another wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata?" Oh yes. And this in Luang Por Sumedho's copy of the Majjhima Nikaya, he's got this passage sort of underlined with sort of purple highlighter in the margins. And the Buddha said, when a feeling arises in the mind of the Tathagata, he knows this is a feeling arising. This is the wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. When a feeling abides in the mind of a Tathagata, he knows this is a feeling abiding in the mind. This is a wonderful and marvelous quality. If when a thought arises, when a thought abides in the mind, when a thought fades away, the Tathagata knows that. This is a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. And so he said, what's really amazing, you want to know something really miraculous, and a newborn baby walking and talking, yeah. The really amazing thing is you can watch your mind. Wow. You can watch a thought arise and pass away. That's a miracle. That's something really wonderful and marvelous. So it's not surprising that Luang Por Sumedho had that underlined and highlighted. It's like, this is because much the spirit of Luang Por Chah's teaching. I mean, there are people amongst his disciples who are totally obsessed with amulets and devas and that whole sort of cosmological world, but that it's not something that Luang Por Chah would support, or they wouldn't go into it in front of him, because he saw that you got this incredible treasure of the Dhamma teaching, and yet it's like you got this wonderful rich food that you're being that's incredibly nutritious and delicious, and then you carefully unwrap it, and then you keep the wrapper and you throw the food away. It's like this isn't the stuff that's nourishing. So you got it the wrong way around.